Months ago, at the opening of the markets, there was celebration at the floor of the JSE, and this was because there was another listing, but not just any other listing. This is a listing of its kind. And this is a team from Cloud Atlas that was celebrating the listing of the Cloud Atlas Big 50 XSA ETF. Quite a mouthful. But joining us right now to demystify all that is Maurice Madiba, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Cloud Atlas. Maurice, this has been termed as a fast of its own. School me, what exactly is different in this ETF?
Okay, so today is a good day to be an African because it's the first Pan-Africa XSA listing on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, which really gives investors exposure to 15 different markets and across 11 different sectors outside of South Africa. So it's quite a monumental day for Cloud Atlas investing, but for Africa, it is the beginning of a new chapter.
And why the reason to exclude South Africa? School me.
Yeah, so if you look at the relative size of South Africa versus its African counterparts, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange has a very large market capitalization and almost dwarfs the market caps of other African exchanges. So investors now haven't had the option to access African markets outside of that because of the size issue and other issues that are pertinent. But when you look at combining 15 different markets into one outside of SA, you end up getting the collective power of Africa, and then it becomes an easier, safer way to sort of trade those markets while you can still trade the JSE at any moment you want. Yeah.
Maurice, how do you select these entities in which to invest in? Because there are some that are from specific countries and specific sectors within those countries. How does this come together?
So what we look at achieving is we have an index review committee which runs the index, the Big 50 XSA index. And we look at exchanges that have been around for over 15 years, that have a few listings on board already. And then we look at the liquidity of the stocks. So when we're picking the stocks on a quarterly basis, we end up getting what we call Africa's blue chips. So those are the companies that have trade the most, have good liquidity, and also good free float.
Africa's blue chips. So just tell us a little bit more about those companies, because I can see that Dangote Cement is part of that profile, and so is Safaricom there in Kenya. Who are the other blue chips that investors will be buying into if they purchase this ETF?
Okay, so there's a North African exposure as well, where you've got the likes of Atijari Wafa, you've got your brewers, your East African breweries, you've got your Nigerian breweries, you've also got Morocco Telecom, which is the biggest weighting. So these are multinational companies and also service the local African markets. So there is a lot of diversity in terms of sectors, obviously with banks making up a big chunk of it. But as you mentioned, the likes of Safaricom, and you would know of M-Pesa and that, that's what we have within this index. So now we're opening up for investors to be able now to buy this on the JSE.
Maurice, please describe to us the investor you're going after, because like you said, obviously these are very interesting portfolios that have very solid backing and performance. Who exactly are you going after?
So it's investors who have a long-term focus, because that's what you sort of require to achieve good returns in Africa. If you're invested for the short term, you end up experiencing a lot of the volatility that comes with the markets. But if you invest over a longer term, I'm talking 3-5 year period, you end up getting quite a decent return from assets that are invested on the African continent. So long-term investors are typically your retirement funds and also your institutional investors. There are some asset managers that also take a view on Africa and play Africa very well. And then we've got your man on the street, which is what we call retail investors. And that's ultimately where we want this product to trickle down to allow Africans to then participate in Africa's growth.
But then tell us about the liquidity challenges, if you preempt any, because African stock markets are known to be quite illiquid. How do you intend on overcoming this?
Yeah, so it's a combination of factors. So number one, the selection of the stocks that we have within the index have a liquidity filter and a threshold. Two, we're in place as the manager of the ETFs to ensure that there is liquidity in the secondary market through trading. And then three, working with a lot of really good brokers on the African continent that can trade into and out of positions. So we manage the liquidity on behalf of investors. Although the liquidity constraints still persist, one thing this product does is it starts to create liquidity in these underlying African markets, you know, therefore sort of developing them to a place where liquidity is no longer an issue.
And just finally, Maurice, just looking at the whole setup of this and excluding South Africa again, back to Fifi's questions of why, but how does this work into the whole idea of integrating the African exchanges?
So there's a talk about, you know, a One Africa exchange where you can trade all stocks and so. This is the first product of its kind whereby you can literally get exposure to the 15 African markets through one price point. So we have looked, every market has its own nuances, Morocco, Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, different settlement days, different opening times, etc., different companies and sectors. But when you buy into this ETF, the basket of shares that you get is across all of these different markets. So it's the first sort of form of soft integration of African stock markets.
Well, thank you so much, Maurice, for those insights, and congratulations for the journey ahead. That was Maurice Madiba, who is the CEO of Cloud Atlas. Now,